The morning air bit at James Miller's exposed skin as he counted under his breath. 48, 49, 50. His breath formed small clouds that disappeared almost as quickly as they appeared. At 28 years old, James had built his life around routine and discipline. Rain or shine, snow or heat wave, his morning workout happened without fail. Today was particularly brutal. The temperature had dropped overnight, leaving the small neighborhood park covered in a thin layer of frost. Most people in town were still tucked under warm blankets, but not James. He had already completed his running circuit and was now halfway through his push-up sets. James lowered himself to the ground one last time, held for a second and pushed back up with a grunt. He jumped to his feet, rubbing his hands together to restore some feeling in his fingers. The thin workout gloves helped, but they weren't designed for this kind of cold. Just the pull-ups left, he muttered to himself, eyeing the metal bar at the edge of the park's exercise area. He blew hot air into his cupped hands, trying to warm them before gripping the freezing metal. The park was peaceful at this hour. A few early risers walked their dogs along the outer path, their collars jingling in the distance. An older man with a newspaper tucked under his arm nodded at James as he passed by. These were the regulars, the same faces James saw almost every morning. They were part of his routine too, even if they never spoke. James was about to start his first set of pull-ups when the sound of tires on gravel caught his attention. A police cruiser had pulled into the small parking lot beside the park. James didn't think much of it at first. Police cars often drove through the area during shift changes, but this one didn't just drive through. It stopped and two officers stepped out. James returned his attention to the pull-up bar, counting as he lifted his body weight. 1, 2, 3, hey, you there, a sharp voice called out. James completed his repetition before dropping back to the ground. The officers were walking toward him, a tall, heavy-set man with a stern expression and a shorter, younger officer who hung back slightly. "Good morning, officers," James said, his breathing slightly heavy from exertion. The taller officer, whose name badge read Reynolds, looked James up and down with obvious suspicion. "What exactly do you think you're doing out here?" The question caught James off guard. "Just my morning workout, sir." Officer Reynolds narrowed his eyes. "At 6 in the morning? In freezing weather?" "Yes, sir. I do this every day." James reached for his water bottle, which was sitting on a nearby bench alongside his gym bag. "Don't move," Reynolds barked, his hand shifting to rest on his belt. James froze, water bottle halfway to his lips. "Is there a problem, officer?" The younger officer, Chen, according to his badge, cleared his throat. "We got a call about suspicious activity in the park." James looked around at the empty park, then back at the officers. "I'm just exercising." "That's what you say," Reynolds said, taking a step closer. "But we've had reports of drug deals going down in this park. People using all kinds of excuses to hang around." "I don't have any drugs," James said calmly. "I'm a personal trainer. I'm just doing my morning routine." Officer Reynolds scoffed. "A personal trainer out here? Don't all you fitness types have fancy gyms to go to?" "I prefer outdoor workouts when possible," James explained, trying to keep his voice level despite the growing tension. "I've been coming to this park for 3 years now." "Let me see some ID," Reynolds demanded, holding out his hand. James hesitated. "Am I being detained for something? I don't understand what law I've broken by doing push-ups in a public park." This seemed to irritate Officer Reynolds further. His face flushed slightly, visible even in the dim morning light. "Listen, buddy, I'm not asking. I'm telling you to show me some identification. Now." James could feel his heart rate increasing, and not from the exercise. He'd heard stories from friends about encounters with police that started with simple questions and ended badly. He took a deep breath. "My ID is in my gym bag on that bench. I'm going to slowly walk over and get it, okay?" Officer Reynolds gave a curt nod. James moved carefully to his bag, aware of the officer's eyes on him. He unzipped the side pocket and pulled out his wallet. "Here you go," he said, handing his driver's license to Officer Reynolds. The officer studied it for a moment. "James Miller. This address current?" "Yes, sir. I live in the apartment complex 2 blocks from here." Officer Chen had taken out a small notebook and was writing something down. Reynolds handed the ID to his partner, who compared it to whatever information he had. "Looks like he's clean," Officer Chen said quietly. "No warrants or anything." Rather than ending the interaction, Officer Reynolds seemed disappointed by this news. He turned back to James with a frown. So what's with the push-ups in 20-degree weather, Mr. Miller? Most normal people are inside where it's warm. Like I said, I do this every day. Weather doesn't stop me. James tried for a small smile. It's kind of my thing. Your thing? Reynolds repeated mockingly. Well, your thing is causing concern among local residents. James doubted that very much. The local residents who were in the park at this hour knew him well. Many had stopped to chat with him over the years, asking for fitness advice or commenting on his dedication. I'm sorry if I've caused any concern, James said. That wasn't my intention. From the corner of his eye, James noticed movement in one of the apartment windows overlooking the park. Someone was watching. He suddenly felt very aware of how this scene might look to an observer. A man surrounded by 2 police officers in an otherwise empty park. Officer Reynolds stepped even closer, his breath visible in the cold air between them. You know what I think? I think you're out here scoping the place, checking to see who comes through, looking for potential marks. Marks? James repeated, confused. Targets, Reynolds clarified. For whatever operation you're running. Officer Chen shifted uncomfortably behind his partner. Reynolds, I didn't ask what you think, Reynolds snapped without looking back. He kept his eyes fixed on James. Empty your pockets. James blinked in surprise. Officer, with all due respect, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just exercising in a public park. Empty your pockets, Reynolds repeated, his voice hardening. Unless you have something to hide? James weighed his options. He knew his rights, but he also knew that challenging the officer further might escalate the situation. After a moment's hesitation, he reached into his sweatpants pockets and pulled out a house key. His phone and a small fitness tracker. That's everything, he said, holding the items out for inspection. Officer Reynolds eyed the items suspiciously but didn't take them. What's that device? It's a fitness tracker. It counts my steps, monitors my heart rate, things like that. Reynolds snorted. Convenient excuse. Could be used for all kinds of communications. Officer Chen finally stepped forward. It's just a Fitbit, Reynolds. My wife has the same one. Reynolds shot his partner an annoyed look before turning back to James. Put your stuff away, and find somewhere else to do your exercises. You're making people nervous. James carefully returned his belongings to his pockets. This is a public park. I have every right to be here. Don't push it, Reynolds warned, his finger jabbing the air between them. I could cite you for loitering or disturbing the peace. For doing push-ups? James couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. For being difficult, Reynolds corrected. I'm being generous here, giving you a chance to move along without any paperwork. I suggest you take it. The tension between them was palpable. In the growing morning light, James could see a small crowd beginning to gather at the park's edge, dog walkers and early joggers watching the scene with concern. Officer Chen placed a hand on his partner's shoulder. Come on, Reynolds. We've got other calls to check out. For a moment, Reynolds didn't move. He kept his eyes locked on James as if daring him to say something else. Finally, he took a step back. We'll be patrolling this area regularly, he said. Don't let me catch you loitering here again. I'm not loitering, James said firmly. I'm exercising, which is a legitimate use of park facilities. Reynolds' face darkened, but before he could respond, Officer Chen spoke up again. We understand, sir. Just be aware that we've had complaints about unusual activity in the early morning hours. You might want to consider varying your routine for your own safety. James nodded at Chen, appreciating the more reasonable approach. Thank you, officer. I'll keep that in mind. As the officers turned to leave, James noticed that the person in the apartment window was still watching. He could now make out that it was a woman, and she appeared to be holding something up, possibly a phone. Officer Reynolds paused at the edge of the exercise area. One more thing, Mr. Miller. Attitude goes a long way in determining how these interactions go. Something to think about. With that final remark, the officers walked back to their cruiser. James stood motionless until they drove away, the tension slowly draining from his body. His workout rhythm completely disrupted, he decided to call it a morning. As he gathered his things, an older man who frequently walked his dog in the mornings approached him. You okay, son? The man asked. Concern etched on his weathered face. That looked pretty intense. James sighed, slinging his gym bag over his shoulder. I'm fine. Just a misunderstanding, I guess. Didn't look like a misunderstanding to me, the man said, shaking his head. Looked like harassment, plain and simple. James didn't respond. He wasn't sure what to say. Part of him wanted to brush off the incident, to treat it as an anomaly in his otherwise predictable routine. But another part recognized the injustice of what had just happened, being treated with suspicion and hostility for simply existing. In a public space, thanks for checking on me, he finally said to the older man. I appreciate it. As James walked toward the park exit, he glanced up at the apartment window once more. The woman was gone. He wondered if she had recorded the interaction, and if so, what she planned to do with the footage. What he didn't know was that by nightfall, his morning encounter would no longer be a private matter between him and two police officers. It would become something much bigger, something that would change not just his routine, but his entire life. Eliza Washington had been sipping her first cup of coffee by the window when she noticed the police car pull into the park. At first, she hadn't thought much of it. Police regularly patrolled the area, but something about the way the taller officer approached the exercising man caught her attention. Eliza had seen this man before. Not personally, they had never spoken, but she recognized him as a regular at the park. Every morning, rain or shine, he was there with his rigorous workout routine. Sometimes she would watch him from her third-floor apartment, impressed by his dedication while she struggled to find motivation for her own neglected exercise plans. When the officer's body language shifted from casual to confrontational, Eliza placed her coffee cup on the windowsill and reached for her phone. Something didn't feel right. She opened her camera app and began recording. Even from her window, she could see the tension in the man's stance as the taller officer moved into his personal space. The second officer seemed uncomfortable, hanging back slightly. This doesn't look good, Eliza murmured to herself, zooming in as much as her phone would allow. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she didn't need to. The aggressive pointing, the way the fitness enthusiast slowly raised his hands in a placating gesture, the scene spoke for itself. When the man carefully reached for his gym bag and pulled out his wallet, Eliza felt a knot form in her stomach. She had seen similar scenes play out on the news, and they didn't always end well. The recording continued for nearly 8 minutes. By the end, when the officers finally returned to their vehicle, Eliza's hand was cramping from holding her phone steady for so long. She watched as the man gathered his things and spoke briefly with an elderly dog walker before leaving the park. Eliza stepped back from the window, reviewing the footage she'd captured. The video was clear enough. You could easily make out the officer's badges and car number, as well as the unnecessarily confrontational approach. What should I do with this? She asked herself, sitting on the edge of her sofa. Eliza worked as a paralegal at a local law firm. She knew enough about rights and procedures to recognize that something wasn't right about what she had just witnessed. But she also knew how complicated these situations could be. After some deliberation, she decided to first learn more about the man in the park. If she was going to potentially get involved, she wanted to make sure she understood the full picture. Eliza spent her lunch break that day walking around the park, asking the regulars if they knew anything about the guy who works out here every morning. Most people recognized him, and a few had actually spoken with him. "Oh, you mean James?" said a woman walking a golden retriever. "He's a good guy. Helps run those free fitness classes for kids over at the community center." An older man nodded in agreement. "Always respectful. Cleans up after himself. Minds his own business. Not sure why those cops were hassling him this morning." By the time Eliza returned to her apartment that evening, she had learned that James Miller was well regarded in the community. He worked as a personal trainer at a local gym and volunteered teaching fitness to underprivileged youth. Several people mentioned his kindness and dedication. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. The video was still there, untouched. With a deep breath, she opened her social media app and began typing. "This morning I witnessed something disturbing from my window. A local fitness trainer, who I've learned is named James Miller, was harassed by police while doing his regular morning workout in our neighborhood park. James is known in our community for his volunteer work with youth programs. I'm sharing this video not to attack our police department, but because I believe in accountability and fair treatment for everyone in our community. Exercise is not a crime." Her finger hovered over the post button for several seconds before she finally pressed it. Then she attached the video and set her phone down. "That's that," she said to her empty apartment, not expecting much to come from her post. She was wrong. By the time Eliza checked her phone again 2 hours later, her post had been shared over 300 times. Comments were pouring in, mostly from local residents expressing outrage, but also from people across the country who had experienced similar situations. One comment caught her eye. "I know James from the community center. He's one of the most dedicated volunteers we have. This is completely unacceptable treatment." Another read, "That's Officer Reynolds. He's had complaints before. Time for the department to address this pattern of behavior." The hashtag #exercise is not a crime was gaining momentum, with people sharing their own stories of being questioned or harassed while engaged in innocent activities in public spaces. By 9 p.m., Eliza's phone rang with a local number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Is this Eliza Washington?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is James Miller. I believe you posted a video of me this morning." Eliza's heart jumped to her throat. "Yes, I did. I'm so sorry if that was out of line. I just thought—" No, James interrupted. "I'm calling to thank you. A friend showed me the video and told me it was spreading online. I had no idea anyone was watching that interaction." Eliza relaxed slightly. "It seemed wrong what was happening to you. I just couldn't stay silent." "Well, I appreciate it," James said, "though I'll admit it's a bit overwhelming seeing myself all over social media." "I can take it down if you want," Eliza offered immediately. There was a pause on the other end. "Actually, no. Let it stay up. Maybe it will help prevent this from happening to someone else." They talked for nearly 30 minutes. James explained that this wasn't his first uncomfortable encounter with Officer Reynolds, though it was certainly the most confrontational. Eliza shared what she had learned about James from the park regulars, making him laugh. "You did a whole investigation on me?" he asked, amusement in his voice. "I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something important before I posted the video," she explained. "That's fair," James acknowledged, "and thorough." By the time they hung up, the video had been viewed over 10,000 times. A local news reporter had sent Eliza a message requesting an interview, and the police department's social media accounts were being flooded with comments demanding a response. James sat in his small apartment, staring at his phone in disbelief. The counter on the video kept climbing. Comments of support from friends, clients, and complete strangers filled the screen as he scrolled. One of his youth program students had messaged him. "Just saw what happened, Coach James. That's messed up. You okay?" He smiled at the concern and typed back a reassuring response. His phone buzzed with another notification. The community center director had sent him a text. "James, the police chief just called me asking for your contact information. I didn't give it to them, but I thought you should know they're trying to reach you." James frowned at the message, unsure how to feel about this development. Part of him wanted to just move on, to return to his routine and forget the whole incident, but another part recognized that this moment had the potential to create real change. He typed back, "Thanks for the heads up. If they call again, you can give them my number." Setting his phone down, James walked to his refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. His routine had been completely disrupted today. After the park incident, he'd gone straight to work, trying to push the encounter out of his mind. But now, with the video circulating and people reaching out, ignoring it no longer seemed possible. He looked at the clock, almost 11 p.m. Normally, he'd be in bed by now, resting up for tomorrow's early workout. But tonight's sleep felt far away. His phone rang again. This time it was a number with the local area code, but not one he recognized. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Mr. Miller, this is Captain Diaz from the Riverside Police Department. I hope I'm not calling too late." James took a deep breath. "No, it's fine. I'm still up. Mr. Miller, I've seen the video of your encounter with Officers Reynolds and Chen this morning. I wanted to personally reach out to you about this incident." "I appreciate that," James said, surprised by the quick response. "What happened this morning is not in line with our department's values or training," Captain Diaz continued. "I'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss this further if you're willing." James considered the request. "I think that would be good, yes." "Thank you," the captain said, audible relief in his voice. "Would 10 a.m. at the station work for you? Or we could meet at a location where you'd feel more comfortable." "The station is fine," James replied. "I'll be there at 10. After hanging up, James sent a quick text to Eliza updating her on the call from the captain. She responded almost immediately. "That's a good sign. Want me to come with you tomorrow? I'm happy to be there as a witness or just for moral support." James found himself smiling at her offer. A complete stranger yesterday, now firmly in his corner today. "That would be great, actually," he typed back. "Meet outside the station at 9:45? Her response came quickly. "I'll be there." James finally got ready for bed, setting his alarm for his usual early workout time. Despite everything, he wasn't going to let one bad experience break his routine. He would be back at the park tomorrow morning, just as he was every day. But as he drifted off to sleep, he knew that while his routine might remain the same, something fundamental had changed. Tomorrow would bring conversations and questions he'd never expected to face, and all because someone had been watching from a window, coffee in hand, unwilling to look away. Despite everything that had happened, James still woke up at 5:30 a.m. the next morning. His phone was flooded with notifications, messages from friends, comments on social media, even emails from local reporters seeking statements. He silenced it and set it aside. His morning routine came first. He dressed in his usual workout gear, adding an extra layer for the cold. As he laced up his running shoes, a moment of hesitation struck him. Would Officer Reynolds be waiting at the park? The thought made his stomach tighten, but he pushed it away. He refused to let fear change his habits. The park was eerily quiet when he arrived. The usual dog walkers and early joggers were nowhere to be seen. James stood at the entrance, scanning the area. No police cars, no officers, just empty benches and frost-covered grass. He began his warm-up, moving a bit stiffly at first. Every sound, a distant car horn, the rustle of leaves, made him glance over his shoulder. But slowly, the familiar rhythm of exercise calmed his nerves. By the time he finished his first set of push-ups, he was fully immersed in his routine. "James?" He looked up, startled. A middle-aged woman stood a few feet away, her small terrier sniffing curiously at the ground between them. "Yes?" he responded, rising to his feet. "I'm Pat. I walk Buddy here most mornings." She gestured to her dog. "I just wanted to say I saw that video. What happened to you wasn't right." James nodded, unsure how to respond. "Thank you. We all notice you out here every day," she continued. "Never causing trouble, just doing your thing. I told the police that when they called me this morning." James raised his eyebrows. "The police called you?" "They're calling everyone who regularly uses the park," Pat explained. "Asking about yesterday's incident, about you, about Officer Reynolds. Sounds like they're taking it seriously." She gave him an encouraging smile before continuing her walk. James watched her go, processing this new information. The department was already investigating, reaching out to witnesses before his scheduled meeting. That seemed promising. By 9:30 a.m., James was showered, dressed, and heading to the police station. He'd chosen his outfit carefully, neat dark jeans and a button-down shirt under his winter coat. Professional, but not overly formal. He wanted to be taken seriously. Eliza was already waiting outside the station when he arrived, 2 coffee cups in hand. She offered one to him with a smile. "Thought you might need this," she said. "Big day. Thanks." He accepted the cup gratefully. "Did you get many reactions to your post?" Eliza laughed. "My phone nearly exploded. I had to turn off notifications. A reporter from Channel 7 called this morning wanting an interview. What did you tell them?" "That I'd think about it," she shrugged. "This isn't about me getting my 15 minutes of fame. It's about what happened to you." James appreciated her perspective. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping their coffee and gathering their thoughts. "Ready?" Eliza finally asked, checking her watch. James nodded. "As I'll ever be." The police station was busier than James had expected. Officers moved purposefully through the lobby. Phones rang continuously and civilians waited in plastic chairs along the walls. A receptionist directed them to a small conference room where Captain Diaz was waiting. The captain stood as they entered, extending his hand. "Mr. Miller, thank you for coming." He turned to Eliza with a questioning look. "This is Eliza Washington," James explained. She recorded the video. Recognition flashed across the captain's face. "Ms. Washington, I appreciate you joining us." Also in the room was a woman in a sharp business suit who introduced herself as Diane Brooks, the department's community relations director. Her presence suggested the department was taking this situation very seriously indeed. "Please have a seat." Captain Diaz gestured to the chairs. "First, Mr. Miller, I want to apologize for your experience yesterday. What happened doesn't reflect how our officers are trained to interact with the public." James nodded but remained silent. Apologies were easy. He wanted to see what actions would follow. The captain seemed to understand his hesitation. "I've reviewed the body camera footage from both officers, which corroborates what we see in Ms. Washington's video. Officer Reynolds' approach was unnecessarily confrontational from the start." "Has he done this before?" Eliza asked directly. Captain Diaz exchanged a glance with Brooks before answering. "Officer Reynolds has had 3 civilian complaints filed against him in the past year. Nothing that reached the level of formal disciplinary action, but enough to establish a concerning pattern." "And Officer Chen?" James asked, remembering the younger officer who had seemed uncomfortable with his partner's behavior. "Officer Chen is relatively new to the force," the captain explained. "He's been with us just under 6 months. This was only his 3rd shift paired with Officer Reynolds." Brooks leaned forward, her expression earnest. "We've already spoken with both officers. Officer Chen has provided his own statement about the incident, which was very forthcoming. Officer Reynolds has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation." James raised his eyebrows, surprised by how quickly things were moving. "That's good to hear." "We're not just doing this because of public pressure," Captain Diaz assured him, "though we can't ignore the fact that Ms. Washington's video has now been viewed over 50,000 times. The hashtag is trending locally. We want to get ahead of this," Brooks added, "not just to manage public relations, but because it's the right thing to do." The meeting continued for nearly an hour. James described his version of events in detail. The captain took notes and asked clarifying questions. At one point, they played the body camera footage, which showed the encounter from the officers' perspectives. Hearing Officer Reynolds' condescending tone and seeing his aggressive body language from this new angle made James's stomach clench. "What happens now?" James asked as the meeting wound down. "The investigation will continue," Captain Diaz explained. "We'll be interviewing other witnesses and reviewing all available evidence. Officer Reynolds will remain on leave until this is resolved." Brooks handed James her business card. "We'd like to issue a public statement later today. With your permission, we'd like to include that we've met with you and are taking appropriate action." James considered this. "That's fine. There's one more thing," Captain Diaz said, his tone shifting slightly. "Given your background in fitness training and your work with youth programs, we'd like to discuss a possible collaboration." James exchanged a surprised glance with Eliza. "What kind of collaboration?" "Our department has been looking to expand our community engagement initiatives," Brooks explained. "We've been considering a physical fitness program that would bring officers and community members together in a positive environment. Your experience and community connections could be valuable." "You want me to help train police officers?" James asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "Not exactly," the captain clarified. "We're thinking more along the lines of joint activities. Officers and community members exercising together, building relationships outside of typical police interactions, breaking down barriers." James didn't respond immediately. The idea was unexpected, to say the least. "You don't have to decide now," Brooks assured him. "It's just something to think about." As they left the station, Eliza nudged James's arm. "That went better than I expected." "Yeah," James agreed, still processing everything. "They're definitely taking it seriously. So what do you think about their program idea?" she asked as they walked to the parking lot. James shrugged. "I don't know. Part of me thinks it's just a PR move." "Maybe," Eliza acknowledged. "But does that make it a bad idea? If something good comes out of this mess, isn't that a win?" Before James could respond, his phone rang. It was the director of the community center where he volunteered. "James, have you seen the news?" the director asked without preamble. "No, what's happening?" "Your story is everywhere. Local stations, social media, even some national outlets are picking it up. People are using it to talk about community policing and public space rights." James stopped walking, causing Eliza to look at him with concern. "There's more," the director continued. "We've received calls from 3 different organizations offering funding for expanded youth fitness programs. They specifically mentioned you by name." "You're kidding," James said, stunned. "Not at all. This could be huge for us, James, for the kids. We could reach twice as many children with these funds." After hanging up, James relayed the conversation to Eliza. who broke into a wide smile. See, good things are already happening. James wasn't entirely convinced. But I didn't do anything special. I was just doing push-ups in a park. Sometimes that's all it takes, Eliza said thoughtfully, being in the right place at the wrong time. Or maybe it was the right time after all. As they reached their cars, a news van pulled into the parking lot. A reporter and cameraman quickly emerged, heading straight for them. Mr. Miller? James Miller? The reporter called, microphone already extended. Could we get a statement about yesterday's incident and your meeting with police officials? James looked at Eliza, who gave him an encouraging nod. It's your story, she said quietly. You get to decide how it's told. Taking a deep breath, James turned to face the camera. 24 hours ago, he had been just another guy doing his morning workout. Now somehow people were listening. Whatever he said next would matter. The red light on the camera blinked on and James began to speak. James hadn't planned what to say to the reporter, but standing there in the police station parking lot, the words came naturally. I was just doing what I do every morning, exercising in a public park, he began. I shouldn't have been treated like a criminal for that. No one should. The reporter nodded encouragingly. And how do you feel about the police department's response? They seem to be taking it seriously, James said carefully. Captain Diaz and Ms. Brooks were respectful and straightforward with us today. Officer Reynolds has been placed on administrative leave while they investigate. Do you think that's enough? The reporter pressed. James considered the question. It's a start. What matters most to me isn't punishing one officer. It's changing how police interact with the community. If this incident leads to better training and policies, then something good will have come from it. The interview continued for several minutes. James found himself speaking about his volunteer work with youth programs and the importance of accessible public spaces. By the end, the conversation had shifted from the specific incident to broader community issues. One last question, the reporter said. We've heard rumors that the police department has invited you to collaborate on a community fitness program. Is that true? James glanced at Eliza, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. They've suggested something along those lines, he confirmed. I'm still considering it. After the news crew packed up and left, Eliza turned to James with an impressed look. You're a natural on camera. Very articulate, James laughed. I was terrified the whole time. Couldn't tell, she assured him. So are you really considering their offer? He sighed, leaning against his car. I don't know. Part of me thinks I should just go back to my normal life. This whole situation has been a lot. I get that, Eliza said. But you have a platform now. People are listening. That's what scares me, James admitted. They parted ways with promises to keep each other updated. James headed to work, where his clients were full of questions about the video and his sudden fame. Most were supportive, though a few seemed uncomfortable with the controversy. By evening, James was mentally exhausted. He collapsed onto his couch, scrolling through the seemingly endless social media notifications. The original video had now been viewed over 200,000 times. News outlets had picked up the story, with headlines ranging from man harassed for morning workout to police department faces backlash over park confrontation. His phone rang. It was his mother calling from 2 states away. James Miller. Why did I have to find out my son is all over the news from Mrs. Hernandez next door? Her familiar voice scolded. Sorry, Mom, he said, smiling despite his fatigue. It's been a crazy couple of days. Are you okay? Really okay? The concern in her voice was evident. I'm fine, he assured her. Just overwhelmed. Well, I'm proud of you, she said firmly. Standing up for yourself that way. Your father would have been proud too. The mention of his late father made James's throat tighten. Thanks, Mom. After catching her up on everything, including the police department's program offer, his mother was quiet for a moment. You know, she finally said, your father always told me that when doors open unexpectedly, it's worth at least poking your head through to see what's on the other side. Her words stayed with him after they hung up. He found himself opening his laptop and typing community police fitness programs into the search bar. To his surprise, similar initiatives existed in other cities, with promising results in terms of building relationships and reducing tensions. The next morning, James returned to the park for his workout. This time he wasn't alone. A small group of supporters had gathered, some with homemade signs reading, "Exercise is not a crime and public parks for all." A few local news outlets had sent photographers to capture the moment. James felt awkward with all the attention, but he went through his routine as normally as possible. When he finished, several people approached to shake his hand or offer words of support. One older gentleman introduced himself as a retired police officer. "What happened to you was wrong," he said bluntly. "But not all cops are like Reynolds. I hope you know that." "I do," James assured him. Officer Chen seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. The man nodded approvingly. "Good officers need community support just as much as communities need good officers. Remember that." Later that day, the police department released their official statement. It acknowledged that Officer Reynolds had violated department protocols, expressed regret for James's experience, and outlined steps they were taking to prevent similar incidents in the future. The statement specifically mentioned enhanced training on community, engagement, and proper use of authority. Captain Diaz also announced the launch of a new initiative called Parks and Recreation Partners, designed to bring officers and community members together through fitness activities. The captain didn't mention James by name, but the implication was clear. James received a text from Officer Chen that afternoon. "Just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened. I should have stepped in sooner. If you're involved with the new program, I'd like to participate." The message surprised James. He hadn't expected to hear from the younger officer directly. After thinking it over, he replied, "Thanks for reaching out. Still deciding about the program, but I appreciate your message." That evening, James met Eliza for dinner at a small cafe. The owner recognized James from the news and insisted on paying for their meal. "This is getting weird," James muttered as the owner walked away. "I'm not some kind of hero." "Maybe not to yourself," Eliza pointed out, "but you've become a symbol for something important. People connect with your story because it could have happened to anyone." James picked at his food. "I've been researching those community police fitness programs. Some of them seem to actually work. So you're considering it?" "Maybe," he admitted. "If I can set some conditions." Eliza leaned forward. "Like what?" "Like making sure it's truly accessible to everyone in the community, especially kids from lower-income neighborhoods. And including discussions about rights and responsibilities, not just for citizens but for officers too." "That sounds really thoughtful," Eliza said. "Have you talked to the community center about it?" James nodded. "The director thinks we could integrate it with our existing youth programs. Those new funding offers would help expand everything. So what's holding you back?" Eliza asked gently. James sighed, struggling to put his feelings into words. "I guess I'm worried about being co-opted. About this becoming a PR stunt that doesn't actually change anything." "That's a valid concern," Eliza acknowledged. "But if you're not at the table, you can't influence what happens." As they continued their discussion, James's phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from a national fitness magazine requesting an interview about his experience and his work with youth programs. "This is just so strange," he said, showing Eliza the email. "A week ago, nobody knew who I was." "Welcome to the age of viral video," she replied with a small smile. "For better or worse, you've got people's attention. The question is, what do you want to do with it?" The next morning, James made his decision. He called Captain Diaz and agreed to meet about the community fitness program, but with his own list of requirements and suggestions. The captain sounded pleased, if a bit surprised by James's well-researched approach. Next, he called the community center director to discuss integrating the police program with their existing youth initiatives. They scheduled a planning meeting for later that week. Finally, he texted Eliza, "Taking your advice. Poking my head through the door to see what's on the other side." Her response came quickly. "Proud of you. Need moral support at any of these meetings?" He smiled at her message. In just a few days, this stranger who happened to be looking out her window at the right moment had become a friend and ally. "Actually, yes," he replied. "Your legal background could be helpful. Plus, you're good at seeing angles I might miss. Count me in," she texted back. 1 week after being confronted by Officer Reynolds for doing push-ups in the cold, James found himself sitting in the community center conference room. Around the table were Captain Diaz, Diane Brooks, the center director, 2 community leaders, and Eliza. They were discussing the framework for what would eventually be called the Common Ground Fitness Initiative. As James outlined his vision for the program, He noticed Officer Chen standing hesitantly in the doorway. James paused mid-sentence and gestured for him to join them. "I believe you all know Officer Chen," James said as the young officer took a seat. "He's expressed interest in being part of this program. I think his perspective would be valuable." Captain Diaz looked surprised but nodded in agreement. Chen gave James a grateful look. As the meeting continued, James felt a growing sense of purpose. What had started as a humiliating and frustrating encounter was transforming into something potentially meaningful. He had no illusions that one program would solve all the problems between police and the community, but it was a step in the right direction. And sometimes, James reflected, that's how change happens. Not in dramatic revolutions, but in small steps taken by ordinary people who refuse to look away when something isn't right. 6 months passed quickly. The cold winter morning when James had been confronted in the park now seemed like a distant memory, though its effects continued to ripple through the community. The Common Ground Fitness Initiative had launched 3 months ago with a kickoff event that drew hundreds of local residents. What had begun as a simple idea, bringing police, officers, and community members together through fitness, had evolved into something more comprehensive. James stood at the edge of the community center's outdoor field, watching as Officer Chen led a group of teenagers through a series of warm-up exercises. The young officer had become one of the program's most dedicated volunteers, showing up consistently for both the youth sessions and the adult classes. "Quite a change from that morning in the park," Eliza said, appearing beside James with 2 water bottles. She handed one to him. "Thanks," he said, taking a long drink. "Sometimes I still can't believe all this came from that mess." The program now ran 5 days a week with different sessions targeting various age groups and fitness levels. Police officers participated as both instructors and participants, working alongside community members in an environment that encouraged conversation and connection. But the initiative went beyond physical fitness. After each session, participants gathered for what they called cool-down conversations, facilitated discussions about community issues, rights and responsibilities, and the challenges of policing. These conversations weren't always comfortable, but they were consistently respectful and productive. "Did you see the numbers from last month?" Eliza asked, nodding toward a group of younger children now taking the field for their session. "The survey results?" James had helped design a monthly feedback system to track both participation and impact. 85% of participants reported improved perceptions of police, Eliza confirmed. "And the department says officer morale is up, especially among those involved in the program." James nodded, pleased but cautious. "That's good. Still early days, though." The impact of the viral video and subsequent program had extended beyond their local community. 3 neighboring cities had reached out for help implementing similar initiatives. James had been invited to speak at a regional conference on community policing. A national fitness magazine had featured the program in their Community Heroes section. Officer Reynolds was no longer with the department. The investigation had uncovered a pattern of problematic behavior that went beyond the incident with James. He had been offered the chance to undergo additional training and counseling, but had chosen to resign instead. "Chief Wilson wants to meet next week," James told Eliza as they walked toward the community center building. Wilson had replaced the previous police chief 3 months ago and had been strongly supportive of the program. "About the expansion?" Eliza asked. James nodded. The success of the initial program had led to discussions about adding new elements, nutrition classes, mental health resources, and career mentorship opportunities. "He thinks we can get additional funding," James explained. "Enough to hire a full-time coordinator." Eliza bumped his shoulder playfully. "Look at you, accidental activist turned program director." James laughed, but her words held truth. What had begun as a response to an unpleasant encounter had gradually become his primary focus. He still worked as a personal trainer, but had reduced his client load to dedicate more time to Common Ground. The community center had created a paid position for him to oversee the expanding initiative. Inside the building, they passed a bulletin board covered with photos from program events. In the center was a framed copy of the local newspaper from 3 months ago. The headline read, "From Confrontation to Collaboration, Community Fitness Program Bridges Divides." The article included a photo of James and Captain Diaz, now Deputy Chief Diaz, cutting a ribbon at the program launch. It also mentioned Eliza's role, both as the person who recorded the original video and as a key advisor to the program, helping ensure that conversations about rights and responsibilities were factually accurate and balanced. "Still think it was just a PR stunt?" Eliza asked, noticing James looking at the article. He shook his head. "No, there's real change happening here." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "But I still wonder sometimes if it would have happened without that video going viral. How many similar incidents never get addressed because no one's watching?" "That's why the education component matters," Eliza said. "Teaching people their rights, teaching officers better approaches. Systemic change, not just individual accountability." James nodded in agreement. The cool-down conversations had evolved to include workshops on civil rights, de-escalation techniques, and community resources. Both officers and residents had opportunities to share their perspectives and concerns in a structured, respectful environment. As they reached James's small office, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his mother. "Just saw your program featured on national news. So proud of you, honey. Dad would be too." He smiled, showing the message to Eliza. "Your mom's your biggest fan," she said with a grin. "She's coming to visit next month," James told her. "Wants to see everything we're doing firsthand." "I can't wait to meet her," Eliza replied. Their friendship had deepened over the months of working together, gradually evolving into something more, though both had been cautious about defining it while focusing on building the program. James sat at his desk, opening his laptop to review the day's schedule. A notification popped up, an email from a reporter requesting an interview for a 1-year follow-up story on the incident. "Can you believe it's been almost 6 months already?" he asked, turning the screen so Eliza could see the email. "Time flies when you're changing the world," she quipped, leaning against the doorframe. James rolled his eyes at her exaggeration, but there was truth in her words too. The program had made a difference, not just in public perception, but in real interactions between police and community members. Several officers had shared stories of how their participation had changed their approach to daily patrols, making them more aware of how they were perceived and more intentional about positive engagement. The youngest participants, the children in the after-school program, showed the most dramatic shifts. Many had previously seen police only in moments of crisis or conflict. Now they knew officers by name, had laughed with them, learned from them. Those relationships couldn't help but shape their future interactions. Later that afternoon, James returned to the park where everything had started. It had become his habit to end each week with a quiet workout, in the place that had unexpectedly changed the course of his life. The park looked different. Now new exercise equipment had been installed as part of a city initiative to promote public health. A small sign near the pull-up bars explained that the improvements had been partially funded by the Common Ground program. As James began his routine, he noticed a police car pull into the parking area. For a brief moment, his body tensed with the memory of that winter morning. But then Officer Chen stepped out, waving and greeting. "Thought I might find you here," Chen said, walking over. "Got a minute?" James nodded, taking a break from his push-ups. "What's up? Remember that group of kids from the West Side apartments? The ones who were skeptical about the program at first?" James remembered them well. 5 teenagers who had initially attended only because their school required community service hours. They had hung back during activities, reluctant to engage with the officers. "They've signed up to be peer leaders for the summer program," Chen said, grinning. "All 5 of them. Said they want to help the younger kids learn the right way to deal with cops." James couldn't help but smile. "That's great news. It's because of how you talk to them," Chen said seriously. "You don't lecture or talk down. You listen. I've been trying to do the same thing on patrol." "Is it working?" James asked. Chen shrugged. "Not always, but more often than you'd think." He glanced at his watch. "I should get back on duty. Just wanted to share the good news." As the officer returned to his car, James resumed his workout. The park around him bustled with activity. Children on the playground, elderly couples walking the paths, a young woman practicing yoga on the grass. Each person moved through the space freely, comfortably as they should in a public park. This was how it should be, James thought. This was what he had been defending that cold morning. Not just his own right to be there, but everyone's. He completed his final set of push-ups and sat back on his heels, looking up at the sky. The journey from that confrontation to today had been unexpected and challenging, but also deeply rewarding. A familiar voice called his name. He turned to see Eliza approaching, workout clothes on, hair pulled back. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, dropping her bag beside his. "I'd like that," he said, making space for her on his exercise mat. As they moved through the routine together, James felt a profound sense of gratitude for Eliza's decision to record that morning, for the community's response, for the officers who chose engagement over defensiveness, for all the small decisions that had turned a moment of injustice into a catalyst for change. The work wasn't finished, might never be finished, but they were moving in the right direction. One conversation, one workout, one connection at a time. And that, James reflected as he and Eliza completed their final set together, was how real change happened. Not all at once, but day by day, person by person, choice by choice. Just like his morning routine, progress required consistency, commitment, and the willingness to show up, even on the coldest days.